Thank you, Shirley. It's a pleasure, but you know, I'm always under a lot of stress, even if I'm an experienced speaker. Thank you very much for staying here until the bitter end. I know you didn't stay for me, but you stayed here because of a party. So that's a nice slot in the program to be the last speaker. So we are about to close that session with a presentation on a sort of new technique. Maybe it's not new for you. Maybe you've been implementing that for some time already, but we're going to discuss class 2. This is, of course, a major topic for us because class 2 is certainly one of the most prevalent type of malocclusion that we get in our practice on a daily basis. So it's our daily life. And so we do not want our patients to continue to have that type of face, right? So we try to improve our clinical results, and I've tried, I suppose, maybe 10 different methods over the course of the last 20 years to try and correct class 2s. Now, there's a consensus, and I'm going to try a number of consensus. We're looking for a system which is efficient, which may sound as a given. We, of course, look for something which is efficient. There's also a consensus on the fact that we try to leverage or to optimize mandibular growth, and we want to get stable results. And of course, we do not need scientific studies from an intellectual point of view, and this is also our patients are asking for. We want to have long-lasting, stable results. Now, how are we getting there? You have a number of parameters that are going to factor in. So that's the age when you start, methods and varied packs, how long you're going to wear the contraptions, whether you're going to go for a fixed or removable appliance. And again, if you resort to literature to find the right system, then I wish you good luck. Again, you listen to your colleagues, you listen to your teachers, and you try. And again, let's try to find some common ground. Age, when you start, there's a consensus according to which there's a growth peak between CS3 and CS4, and I will give you more explanation as to what it really means. Now, the method, I think we're mostly trying to protrude the mandible in order to foster mandibular growth. If we go for a removable appliance, we try to have the longest wear time, 22 hours on 24, for a duration of 12 to 18 months, so as to get an impact on growth. And if you were to select between fixed and removable, of course, a fixed appliance, that way you're not depending on your patient cooperation. Now, type of appliance, there are so many out there, and it seems that the type of appliance meeting all the previous criteria, well, we're going to tell you which one it is. But before that, I would like to discuss the growth peak, which was theorized by McNamara. So when you look at your profile teleradiographs, you have different shapes in your discs. And so when you have a concave shape between CS3 and CS4, this is really the moment when you have a peak in the growth. And this is the most beneficial stage. So before that, maybe too early, and after that, you're going to have a harder time getting to the right result. So when we take all these criteria in stock, it seems that the best appliance is that one. That's a HIPS device. This is a device thanks to which you're going to protrude the mandible. The appliance can be worn for a period of time to 6 to 18 months, and it's a fixed appliance. So this is a wonderful type of appliance, but the problem with it, if it's difficult and time-consuming, it takes up to 3/4 of an hour to place such a HERPS appliance. Acceptance by patients, it's difficult because you're going to have lesions in the gums. Your cheeks are going to be bulkier, especially during the first phases. And then it's not rare that the patient or the parent comes back 3 days later and they want the whole thing to be unmounted. And again, it's a rigid type of appliance. And so it's not very comfortable. The thing may break, and of course, if it breaks during summertime, that's horrible for your reputation because you're going to have a hard time to fix the situation as an emergency. So of course, it does meet all the criteria, but. So I used to use it, but I just stopped using herbs for the different problems that come with it. So I had to change. Now, if we look at the current trends, and I try, of course, to focus on France, because depending on the country, depending on the culture, it may change very much. But in France, there's a high trend around removable appliances, 12 hours. So where you have an activator with the low-true technique, functional rehabilitation as well is very fashionable. And I'm not going to give you my opinion on that, but that's the first sort of trend. Then you have a removable trend with, I would say, aligners, so 22 hours wear. So the trends, you get the PUL, so a number of colleagues are using that. And of course, we have Invisalign mandibular advancement with tie wings for class 2 in teenagers. And if we go to multi-brackets appliances, where you're going to work with elastics, of course, when you reach the rectangular wire stage, so it's very conventional. Also, headgear, extra oral force, is something that is sort of going out of fashion. And also, forces is something which is still quite fashionable because you do not depend on your patient's cooperation. And then again, last group of trendy devices, what I use in my practice. So I use a fixed appliance. So I use elastics. I like elastics. I like those. I spend some time with my patient to train them. And so I use them either in the framework of a genius treatment, the shorties that we discussed. And I'm also using intermaxillary elastics with carrier brackets. Now the shorties. Those are short elastics. So it's not from the canine to or cuspid to a molar, but more from a premolar to a molar. And they exert a light force. And we use them from the bonding stage, from the onset. So I usually bond the upper arch, and a couple of months later, I will bond on the lower arch. And when I bond on the lower arch, I ask my patients to wear elastics. So we are really at the very early stages, and you do see that the mesiolingual rotation is not preventing me from having my patients wear elastics. I'm going to show you that picture, which is very important. Now, this is the case that you're going to see in a couple of minutes. And you can see on the profile picture, one incisor, you have a slight gingival recession, and so I'd rather you see that here. So the gingival recession is already here, and obviously it's going to be still there at the end of treatment. Eleanor, 11 years, class 2, division 2. It's not a very severe case, but still class 2, so this requires treatment. Of course, we need to correct class 2, open the bite, unlock the bite. Of course, you've seen that already. Now, so 014 Genius Thermal Ultra, very light elastics. So basketball, being 122 hours at 24, with 3/16 and 2 ounces, so extremely light forces. And this is very quickly what we get. Class 1 occlusion, 6 to 9 months. And again, the objective is to reach that class 1 in those 6 to 9. So Sagittal first. So the objective is really to get to that class 1 result in a matter of 6 to 9 months, to get it out of the way. To get it out of the way, because the challenge, obviously, to really correct class 2. Now, once you have that class 1, then everything just flows. It's smooth sailing because they only have to wear elastics just to maintain that result. So you want to get there in a matter of 6 to 9 months. We used to have 3 to 4 millimeters gap. So now, as I said, it's out of the way. You can wear elastics. If you're unlucky, maybe it's going to take a little more time to get the final result. But it's still, as I said, very smooth as a final, to reach a final step. Now, I did show you that the gingiva, you did have a recession here. Maybe I lost 1 millimeter in gingival attachment, but the gingiva was already sort of weak and fragile. Now, of course, you need to unlock your occlusion. Sometimes you're going to use bite ramps, turbos to help with correction. So you unlock, you use those shorties, and then you can increase the strength of those shorties up to 0.14. So you start with a basketball type of shorty, but then you can go to 3x11, and except in that case, I could finish the case with this very light force. The growth in that girl really helped in finishing my case in a very successful manner. Now, shorties will be used from the onset. This will be more on an overbite type of patient. We try to increase the vertical dimension in the posterior part of the mandible. On dolichofacials, people with a long face, the elastics will be worn from the cuspid to the second premolar, again in those very selected patients. And most of the time, as I said, I use basketballs to begin with, and sometimes I will transition to baseballs. And usually when I transition to those, most of the time, I manage to get to a type 1, class 1 occlusion. Now, what are the advantages of those shorties? Well, cooperation. You have better cooperation when you start treatment. You do have to manage the sort of fatigue that appears over time. And, well, of course, you can also threaten your patient and say, well, are you going to wear your elastic unless I'm not going to unbond? Now, even in patients where I thought that I would have a hard time even to cooperate, I was very nicely surprised more often than not. I don't know why, but most of the time I also get better results with younger patients. You know, you apply them on a teenager, bonded on all teeth, upper arch, lower arch. And at the end of treatment, if you need them to wear elastics, they're going to be even older, and they're going to be even more self-conscious. So when you have a very strong class 2, 6, 7 millimeters, and you want to treat them with elastics only, they're going to wear those light elastics. You're going to reach the stage when 5 to 6 millimeters are left. But then we need to get them to wear elastics, stronger elastics. Also, they will be used to them and they will be, more compliant. So it's always a good idea to start very early with softer elastics. And I think it's very useful when you want to correct class 2. And I really like them. They make my life easier. Now, you can wear them long term. You start them when you bond, mostly in a young teenager rather than an older teenager. Again, you will probably wear them in that particular time frame where growth is optimal. Now, you can also use them after an activator was used. So when you use an activator, then you bond brackets, and then you're going to use shorties, because you know that after an activator and you bond, you may have a provisional relapse. And so this may help in stabilizing and avoiding that sort of round tripping. When you have a class 1, dental class 1, plus class 2, skeletal class 2, it may be beneficial to use those elastics after you bond bite ramps, because you have the dental decompensation. And so it's a very good idea to use those elastics when you unlock the bite, when you have the sort of class 1s, but which are actually skeletal class 2. It's very comfortable for the orthodontist, because again, you get the biggest challenge out of the way. You avoid extractions, you avoid more invasive devices like forceps, and you, of course, can dedicate more time to finishing your treatment. And so you concentrate your brain on a single task, on a single objective, and of course, it just makes your life a lot easier. So the advantages of that is cooperation, you leverage growth, and you have a good stabilization of your results.
Si vous n'aimez pas les élastiques,
if you don't like short elastics, some people are reluctant to using short elastics, then you're going to have to wait for the rectangular wire phase. This is your picture. This is your picture. Get back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. We can also use beveled bite ramps, but that would warrant a full presentation. And it's a concept of mini twin blocks, so beveled twin blocks. You probably have all heard about the carrière motion, but you have not heard about the Genius SF. Even Charlie doesn't know about the Genius SF. Genius SF is the Genius Sagittal first. That's what it stands for. So carrière motion. Well, give back to carrière what belongs to carrière. A 1 millimeter correction, 1 millimeter per month, right from the beginning of the treatment. That's how we start. We use heavy elastics with a mandible anchoring, and we move back 4 teeth, cuspids, first premolars, and we rotate the upper first molar, and we reposition the mandible. On the right-hand side picture, this is what we ask the patients to wear. The big elastic is not on the picture, but the patient should be wearing this big elastic, very strong elastic, and the mouth guard, which serves as an anchoring. So mandibular repositioning with growth can be discussed. It relies on the principle of using a very heavy elastic, which will push the mandible forward. It's a very strong elastic, and the mandible being pushed forward It seems to have an active effect between inverted commas. It's an activator effect, or supposedly.
La variante simplifiée.
This is a simplified variation. I will not say who this picture belongs to. He will know. The carrière motion system, which is relatively expensive because I think the pair costs more than 200 euros, maybe 250. Yes, it's very expensive. I can see you all nodding. Yes, very expensive. So there is a cheaper variation, and this is very, very cheap, a few cents. Charlie, you give it for free, don't you? You can even get it for free. Okay, it's tungsten. Well, whatever. Well, you have to bend the wire. And although I was trained in the US for 3 years, I'm not going to do this. Somebody is in the room and knows how to bend this. Well, miss, everybody will come to you and you will make money. Now, the issue with this simplified variation is that there is no molar rotation. I won't go into too many details regarding the carrière motion system. We're not here to talk about carrière as a system, but there is a seal on the molar, and it actually rotates the molar, and the molar rotation will help you gain 2 millimeters in class 2 correction, and that's obviously essential. So this is a simplified variation. It's not quite the same thing. It's easier to make. Well, you need to make it, and there is no molar rotation. So we are going to adjust the carrière to the Genius system. Well, we've always copied and adapted what the Spanish make, including tortillas. This is how I started. It's really random. I realized when I talked to some of you today, they said, oh, I've done this for a long time, but I thought I was the first one. Anyway, so this is a Class 2 Division 2 case. Class 2 Division 2. I wanted to use the carrière motion. On right-hand side, it was easy, but on left-hand side, I did not have enough stock. Why left? Because there is an impacted cuspid, 23, and we have a low mesiodistal diameter in the deciduous cuspid, so we have to push 24, 25, 26 back to make room for the impacted cuspid. So I bonded 2 brackets simply because I didn't have the right equipment available. I didn't have a carrière motion available, so I made it myself. I made my own carrière, homemade carrière system. And I realized that in 4 months, the class 2 was corrected. Even hypercorrected. Always try to achieve hypercorrection because there will be a bit of relapsing. And, well, you can ask the patient to wear elastics at night to keep everything in place. But it's really easy, you know, tell the patient, give me 1 more month. And look here what happens. The open bite, the deep bite, sorry, it's actually correcting itself, I believe, through a mandibular rotation due to the elastic. That's my assumption. But I did nothing about the deep bite except it sort of corrected itself. There's another case where I did not have the mandibular rotation, but I ended up with a posterior open bite. So sometimes there may be a different reaction. Well, generally this is what happens, and I can show you many cases of deep bites spontaneously resolving. So I did not have to have so many carrière motions in my drawer. This is very expensive. All I need is brackets and arch wires, and that's it. However, look here, the mesial stock mesial from the molar. If you don't ligate or block the wire, you will end up with crowding because the second premolar is going to push everything else out. So this case, there was already an initial phase, expansion and incisor alignment when the patient was a child. Now he has his permanent dentition, class 2 on the right-hand side. Not a very serious class 2, 4, 5 millimeters, 6 millimeters for the cuspid. Not a very big class 2, but still needs to be corrected. And we can use Shorties on one side. Except here we wanted to do it differently. Here we have the green position. So like is always the case with lateral class 2s, we have a deviated midline. It's the mandibular midline, which is deviated in 90% of the cases anyway. And here we have a deep bite. And also a difference in the vertical level of the cuspid. So why do we have this difference in the vertical level of the cuspid? 23 on the left-hand side is in the embrasure between 33 and 34. 13 on the right-hand side, however, is in edge to edge, resting on 43. And that's why it's not extruding. So we have always a difference in the vertical dimension because there's an asymmetric class 2. Here we have the Genius SF system at play. So it stands for Genius Sagittal first. What's the concept? Well, the patient is already in class 1. We have placed the elastic and we have bonded 3 brackets. We can use them later. And I'm going to explain the system in detail. Here we have the left-hand side, simply to show that because we are using the elastic on one side, doesn't mean that the other side will then shift to a class 2. It does happen sometimes, but not very often, very rarely. So you can very well use asymmetric mechanics. It doesn't make any difference. This is the end. The end. Well, the end after 4 or 5 months. Here we have the right-hand side, class 1. The midlines are coming closer. There is still a slight deviation, but because we have a 41-42 crowding, so we still have a very slight deviation towards the right, we see that the deep bite is slightly improved, simply due to the elastic and the mandibular rotation. And we see that as far as the cuspids are concerned, well, everything seems to be symmetric. If the patient wears the elastic, because that's essential, the patient has to wear the elastic, the class 2 will be corrected and the cuspid will extrude. And if 2 cuspids start at the same level and they extrude, well, it doesn't matter. If you have to correct, you will correct it with the multi-attachment. So what do we do here? We take an impression. Oh, well, intraoral scanner, sorry. Well, you're no longer allowed to say impression. It's not politically correct. You sound old-fashioned when you talk about impressions. We take an intraoral scan of the lower arch, sorry. And the following week, we bond the bracket on the cuspid, and then we place the molar bands, or rather molar bands first, and tube on the cuspid, and then I'm going to describe the system very quickly, and this is what we do. And we tell the patient, okay, fine, 2 things you need to do. One thing, you wear a night guard and an elastic, and that's it. And you remove them to eat and brush your teeth. Otherwise, you wear the aligner all the time. Well, it's not a night guard, it's an aligner. It's got both an advantage and a disadvantage. The big advantage is that it controls the mandibular incisor torque in a splendid way. The aligner to correct the torque of the mandibular incisor is the best you can get. The downside is that if you ask the patient to wear the aligner for 6, maybe 8 months, it could break, it could, and the patient comes back and says, it's broken, I have to replace it. So that's the disadvantage. And I'm open to all suggestions because I'm here to learn. I want to make progress. Occlusal views. We see the molar rotation. We're trying to distalize the 13, 14, 15, 16 segment, although 16 is not in the picture, and we want to rotate the molar. Alain Decker, as Catherine knows, loved transpalatal arch wires to correct the class 2s with a transpalatal device. So here we have everything is clear, everything is okay. And when we reach this situation, the patient is in class 1 and he's ready for the genius. Ready for the genius means, well, we're ready. All we have to do is add a few brackets, remove that aligner, and you don't have to remove 250 euro carrier motion device. So, last case before we go to have drinks and dance and wine and dine. Malpositioned incisors, moderate deep bite, mandibular incisors are in protrusion, which will be confirmed by the profile radiography X-ray. So you didn't show us a 7 millimeter class 2, you will argue. Well, wait a few minutes. This is the patient. Slightly convex profile, nothing really worth writing home about. Cephalometric measurements, mandibular retrognathia by protrusion of the mandible incisors. He's neither high angle nor low angle, and his growth is in the CS4 stage, so the end of mandible growth. So we shouldn't wait for rectangular arch wires or elastics because we reach CS5 and this is too late. He's not very old, actually. Do we have his birth date? No, we don't, but he's not very old. This is the pan X-ray, nothing special. Here we have placed the Genius SF device, homemade. 4 months, 1 millimeter a month, class 1. Very easy. 5 months, hypercorrection. And this is when I thought you should wear an elastic at night, and during the next appointment, I will bond the bracket, the Genius brackets, and place the multi-attachment device. I take an 1825 TU, thermal ultra, which I believe is stiff enough to hold the elastic and will resist to chewing forces. Why? Because it's going to change shape and revert to its original shape, and it's super elastic, so it will engage the cuspid if the cuspid is rotated. I cut pieces, and I take this part, which follows the curve between the cuspid and the molar, so cuspid, premolars, and molar. You remember, none of the cuspids went into a mesiovestibular rotation. Here I describe the segment. Little fold in front to hold the wire in place before the cuspid. Then the coil goes from the distal part of the bracket on 12 to the distal part of 16, and I place a stop. Why the stop? Just to make sure that the wire doesn't slide. It activates the coil by 1.5 millimeter, and by activating the coil plus the towing that is integrated in the bracket will rotate the molar. This is how we get the molar rotation effect, which is actually what the Carrière device achieves. Then the wire here is going out distally by 1 millimeter because the coil being activated, we need to control the molar. Just like this. Chuck. This is what I told you, and I anticipated the time to make the segment 5 minutes. What kind of forces? Oh, well, we'll see. We'll see. Wait for the end. Wait for the end for the questions. 150 questions are going to be huge. So spaces are created between the lateral and the cuspid. Okay. Molar rotation. nothing special. You have to wait. Everything comes in due time. Here we have the elastics. I took the back side of the package because there is nothing written on the other side. Weightlifting? Decathlon, something like that. I'm only aware of forces. I'm not a scientist myself. I'm only aware of forces. Take the biggest elastic you can get your hands on. Carrière says you can even use 2 elastics if you're not happy with the speed at which the teeth are moving, at which the class 2 is correcting itself. Okay, well, why not? I don't think I ever needed to use 2 elastics. Upfront picture shows you that the deep bite is correcting itself, not entirely, but partly, because of the pressure exerted by the mandible incisors coming in contact with the maxilla. Then there is also a correction of the open spaces. Here we have a pan X-ray. We see, yeah, I think we can see the molars. Look at the molars. Yes, not bad. Procephalometric X-ray, I hate it when they draw lines, but the other dentist did it. Lower incisor, we moved from 115 to 116. A and B angle went from 8 to 6.5, 1.5. I'm happy. That's a real issue. Correcting a class 2 with mandibular incisors that are proclined is not always easy. I would never extract in such a case. I mean, that's not the way I do treatment. So I don't have trouble sleeping at night. I simply want to bring the patient back into a functional class 1 and achieve a stable result. 6 months, well, 4 months of treatment, the patient is back in class 1, and he will wear elastics for 1.5 years until the treatment is finished, and I think everything will be stable. There are more spectacular cases, obviously, and I could show you 6 mm class 2s and mandibular repositioning, maybe Sunday bites, I don't know. Sagittal first. First 6 months of treatment. It's like the Carrière, but not quite like the Carrière. This is a summary of everything I said. There are upsides and downsides. There is a class 2 correction. Within 6 months, we restore a class 1. Same advantages as the Carrière motion, but what are the differences? Difference is that with this system, the cuspid rotation is no longer an obstacle. Genius SF will correct it because the segment is thermal ultra. So if we have a distopalatal rotation in the cuspid, sometimes it can be difficult to place a Carrière motion on it. You can do it, but it's difficult. You can do it because there's a distance between the Carrière motion and the canine, but it can be difficult. So here the cuspid rotation is no longer an obstacle. I have less broken devices or unbonded devices with the Genius SF than with the Carrière. With the Carrière, it very often becomes unbonded. And positioning the brackets and tubes is compatible with the Genius SF. And it's compatible with the multi-attachment full Genius treatment that will come later. It's obviously cheaper. And no need to have the Carrière in store in your drawers. All you have to do is have the wires and a pair of pliers. So you don't break them so often, and you don't have to have a full store of different sizes.
C'est pas fini.
Wait. I'm not done. I've got 4 seconds. I never grow tired of the fact that it's very reproducible, so I'm going really fast. Class 1, we corrected the deep bite. We can go and have a drink and dance. Well, thank you. Auto partner is going to give us a lot of fun. Thank you.